Greetings one and all. Welcome back to Eye of the Beholder, where we review 20 years of WotC and WizKids Dungeons & Dragons miniatures created between 2003 through 2023. Today we continue our review of the Elemental Planes, picking back up with the creatures from the Plane of Fire. So grab your SPF 2000 and come on in. Azers are dwarf-like elementals with hair and beards composed of flames and bodies so hot they can injure those nearby. First appearing in the AD&D Monster Manual 2, like dwarves, they tend to live in tight-knit communities, are hardworking, and have a love of gold and gems. Fun fact, Azers have been waging war against Ifritis for generations. WotC gives us an Azure miniature in the inaugural Harbinger set of 2003. Paint and pose-wise, it's about what you'd expect from an early mini. Called an Azure Raider, it's set on a small base. The two-tone orange body and bronze color of the weapon and skirt are it for color, and while the detailing on the shield and skirt are decent, not so much of the body, and particularly the face. The pose? Get used to it, you'll see it again. Score: Paint 10, Pose 9, Playability 13, Pizzazz 10, for a score of 42. Three years later, we get this Azure Fighter in 2006's War of the Dragon Queen set. Much better detailing on this one, with the scale mail coat particularly well done. The body appears golden, with the face, arms, and legs golden hued. Note the bare feet. I like the facial detailing as well, and the hair and beard are spot on too. The pose is basically the same as the previous one, albeit slightly leaning forward. Score: Paint 14, Pose 12, Playability 16, Pizzazz 15, for a score of 57. WizKids give us their only Azure Mini in 2016 Storm King's Thunder set. Using translucent red plastic for the hair and beard to great effect, however there is no color difference between the torso and the lower body armor. This is offset a bit by the bits of blue around the waist as well as on the shield. Another nice touch, Azure tend to conduct heat into their weapons, which we see here with a lick of flame on the hammerhead. Score: Paint 14, Pose 14, Playability 16, Pizzazz 17, for a score of 61. The Ifriti are the dominant race of the plains. Similar to the Jinn or the Dao, but universally hated by almost all other races, as they see all others as servants or, preferably, slaves. While they are immensely strong and can easily kill with their bare hands, they are generally armed with enormous two-handed scimitars. Every old-school D&D player recognizes this Ifriti. This is the cover model of the original AD&D Dungeon Master's Guide. From 2005's Angel Fire set, this mini hits me right in the nostalgias. While the lower legs are obscured by billowing smoke, the rest of the extremely well-cut body looks good. I love the cross arms across the torso, the positioning of the scimitar, and the impervious gaze. Score: Paint 23, Pose 25, Playability 18, Pizzazz 25, for a score of 91. We get our next Ifrit, called an Ifriti Flame Strider, in 2008's Against the Giants set. Standing head and shoulders over the previous mini, this orange-bodied, blue-clad monster is imposing. Then you throw in the flaming two-handed scimitar raised high in ready position. This thing is awesome. Despite my old-school love of the Angel Fire mini, this is what I'll use in play. Finally, facial detailing is amazing as well. Love the sneer. Score? Yeah, 100. We get our last WotC Ifrit in the last WotC set, 2010's Lords of Madness. Called an Ifrit Fireblade, it's a solid mini that only suffers in comparison with its predecessor. The blood-red body is appropriately muscular, and the aggressive pose, striding forward, sword-wielding left arm pulled back with right arm forward for balance, is excellent. Another great facial expression as well, lips pulled back to bare its teeth, eyes locked on its foe. Score: Paint 18, Pose 25, Playability 20, Pizzazz 22, for a score of 85. WizKids goes big with their first Efreet mini. From 2015's Rage of Demons set, setting this mini on a clear stand makes it by far the tallest of our Efreet. A fiery orange, translucent lower body coalesces into the standard red torso, scimitar-wielding creature we know and love. Despite its impressive stature, the detailing of body and face are mediocre, but the pose is pretty decent, with scimitar raised high in preparation of a killing blow. Score: Paint 15, Pose 18, Playability 18, Pizzazz 21, for a score of 72. We get our final Efreet mini in 2023's Sand and Stone set, and we go out with a whimper, not a bang. Not particularly interesting in paint or pose, the very dark red of the body hides the musculature and facial details, while the positioning of the sword is the least aggressive of the batch. I do like the blue coloring of the skirt, along with the golden fringe, armbands, and ankle bands, but in the great WotC versus WizKids Efreet debate, WotC wins this one 3-2. Score: Paint 13, Pose 15, Playability 15, Pizzazz 16, for a score of 59. More truth in advertising. The fire bat is just that, a bat that is engulfed in flames. First appearing in 1982's OG Monster Manual 2, fire bats are slightly larger, slightly smarter than your mundane bat, with a magpie's propensity for shiny things. Attacking in flocks, fire bats will bite to drain blood while simultaneously doing fire damage. As you can imagine, water is an effective defense against these critters. Our first fire bat comes from 2008's Against the Giants set. By now, WotC has gotten the hang of using translucent plastic for these types of creatures, going with a bright orange here. Detailing is tough to see, but WotC makes a clever choice of using a column of flame to both anchor the fire bat to the base while giving the illusion of flight. I do wish it was a common though. Making it uncommon makes it more difficult to collect a flock. Score: Paint 14, Pose 17, Playability 14, Pizzazz 15, for a score of 60. WizKids goes with a darker translucent plastic in their version of the fire bat in 2015's Elemental Evil set. Nice job using a darker plastic to silhouette the body wreathed in flames. I can't tell if it's painted on or embedded in the plastic. Pose catches it in mid-flight with the help of a plastic stand, which is pretty stable for such a small mini. Finally, WizKids does us right by making this a common. Release the flock. Score: Paint 16, Pose 17, Playability 20, Pizzazz 16, for a score of 69. Fire elementals just want to watch the world burn. From the OG Monster Manual, these creatures are fast, agile, and ferocious. Their favorite method of attack is simple: charge their opponents, slam into them, and set them ablaze. Like other elementals, they can be summoned by powerful wizards, but they don't like it and will do all they can to escape, hopefully burning the offending mage to ash in the process. Right out of the gate, we get this large fire elemental in 2003's Harbinger set, and while it might not look like much now, this was an absolute beast in the miniatures game. Uniform orange with a dark wash for detailing, it appears to be rising out of the base, lower body a column of fire while the upper body forms arms, clawed fingers, and a face that only a mother can love. We got lots of other fire elementals coming up, but you never forget your first. Score: Paint 15, Pose 20, Playability 18, Pizzazz 23, for a score of 76. A year later, we get this medium fire elemental in 2004's Archfiend set. This is a very clever pose by WotC, with the orange-white flames forming two slits for eyes and a large mouth that, to me, appears to be laughing maniacally. This is the epitome of what a fire elemental is, reveling in the destruction he is causing. Score: Paint 17, Pose 18, Playability 18, Pizzazz 16, for a score of 69. In 2006, WotC discovered translucent plastic and never went back to painted plastic for fire-based creatures. From the War of the Dragon Queen set, we get this huge fire elemental, and wow! Look at it on the turntable. Thanks in part to its size, you can really see how the light filtering through the translucent orange plastic gives the impression of dancing flames deep within the body. Playability takes a bit of a hit, as I'm not sure how often a party would encounter one of this size, but for the rest, well, Paint 25, Pose 25, Playability 18, Pizzazz 25, for a score of 93. From the same set, we get this small fire elemental. Same translucent orange plastic with basically the same pose as its big brother. I like how the flames at its feet completely cover the small base. Pose has it leaning slightly forward as if flowing toward a target. And while I don't usually do this, take a look at the two side by side. While it's certainly not as impressive as Big Bro, it's still cool. So score is Paint 25, Pose 25, Playability 23, Pizzazz 15, for a score of 88. A year later, WotC gives us their final Fire Elemental Mini in the Desert of Desolation set. With the same translucent orange as the others, this one is more of an uncontrollable inferno with no discernible face or body to draw focus. Because it truly captures the fiery chaos of the creature, I feel this is the most playable of the WotC Fire Elemental miniatures. At least, it's the one I would use. Score: Paint 23, Pose 25, Playability 24, Pizzazz 20, for a score of 92. Naturally, WizKid's first pass at a Fire Elemental Mini comes in their 2015 Elemental Evil set, and they went a bit of a different way. Rather than the mostly clear translucent plastic, they went with a more burnished look, with an orange body more two-tone, lighter orange highlighting the details. The snake-like lower body swirls up to an upper torso with a face peering through the flames, great positioning on the arms, outstretched, claws reaching toward its foe. Score: Paint 18, Pose 23, Playability 20, Pizzazz 17, for a score of 78. Our final Fire Elemental Mini comes in 2020's Fangs and Talons set, a set that has one of each type of elemental, and not a bad one in the bunch. This is the best. The same two-tone orange as the previous Mini. This one is larger and more threatening than its predecessor. Same swirling lower body, but with a better detailed face and fiery spine along its back. This is pretty cool. Also, note the circular void in the center. What is that? Seriously, I can't find a flaw here, so score 100. We've already described elemental myrmidons in previous videos, but here's a quick recap. They are elementals who have been captured by powerful mages in specially created suits of armor to serve as servile weapons of war. Of all the myrmidons, fire myrmidons are the most destructive, seemingly enjoying the carnage they wreak despite their enforced servitude. WotC gives us our first Fire Myrmidon, which they call a Fire Archon, in 2007's Desert of Desolation set. The translucent orange body nicely offsets the steel gray of the belt, armbands, breastplate, and helmet, not to mention the dual swords it's wielding. Gliding forward on a layer of superheated air, right arm raised to deliver a sword strike, with the left arm held low in reserve. This is absolutely book correct. Score: Paint 22, Pose 25, Playability 19, Pizzazz 24, for a score of 90. WizKids gives us their interpretation of a Fire Myrmidon in 2015's Elemental Evil set, and this one is pretty damn cool too. Same translucent orange body, but a touch darker at the base, and with darker armor, this gives it a more ominous look than its predecessor. Pose has it leaning slightly forward as it brings its right-handed sword to bear, but unlike the previous, it holds the left-hand sword in front in a more defensive posture. I really can't say which one I like better, so I'm giving this one the exact same score as the previous one. Paint 22, Pose 25, Playability 19, Pizzazz 24, for a score of 90. We've also talked about the Mephits in the past videos. Quick recap: annoying little bastards who delight in torturing all. I'm sure they consider themselves simply mischievous pranksters. As one can imagine, the most dangerous and destructive of the Mephits are the Fire Mephit. We get our only miniature version of one in 2007's Unhallowed set. It's the largest of the Mephits we've seen so far, crouching low on its base with wings spread as if about to take flight. We get the same internal fire effect from the translucent orange as we got with the WotC Fire Elementals, which is cool. Score: Paint 16, Pose 19, Playability 15, Pizzazz 18, for a score of 68. Magmen first appeared in the OG Monster Manual 2 and are the most common elemental from the plane of fire found on the prime material plane. And perhaps no other creature wreaks more unintentional havoc than Magmen, as they live nothing more to create chaos by burning everything. They don't understand that it's dangerous on the prime material plane. They think it's funny. Our first Magmen comes in 2005's Angel Fire set. Pre-WotC's discovery of translucent plastic, here we get an orange body with multiple black splotches, particularly along the back, to represent the cooling magma of the body. This is cool. Look closely at the face. This is one happy elemental, just doing what he can to burn the world down. It's not really book correct, but I like it anyways. So score is Paint 15, Pose 13, Playability 18, Pizzazz 18, for a score of 64. We don't get another Magnum until 10 years later in WizKids' Elemental Evil set of 2015. Translucent orange for the body, liberally covered with dark splotches denoting the cooler skin, is book correct. It's hard to see, but I'm pretty sure that the upraised flicker of flame on each hand is just that, and not a double middle finger salute, but with Magnums, you can never tell. Score: Paint 14, Pose 13, Playability 18, Pizzazz 15, for a score of 60. Our final Magman comes 3 years later in 2018's Monster Menagerie 3 set, and of the three, it's the weakest. With a body almost solidly dark, we get our only hint of flame from the translucent orange cowlick at the top of his head. Pose is nothing special either, although we do get a bit of a facial expression from the wide open eyes and mouth. Score: Paint 11, Pose 12, Playability 12, Pizzazz 8, for a score of 43. The full arch and fora are intrinsically linked together as they share a soul. While underlined, a full arch treasures freedom and will fight slavery where they find it during their travels. And they are fearsome fighters indeed, Both with the falchion and spell-like abilities, even their body can cause damage due to the heat emanating from it. Fours are bird-like creatures who are mostly peaceful, hunting small animals and generally minding their own business. This changes if the full arch it is linked to is killed, and vice versa. The linked survivor of a pairing will search endlessly for its partner's killer to exact revenge. Fun fact, both the full arch and fora explode upon death. We get our only full arch in 2005's Angel Fire set. Standing with one foot on a boulder with its falchion raised in front, the pose suggests he's about to use the boulder to launch himself in a leaping strike against his enemy. There's a lot of nice detailing on this mini, particularly in the leather armor, and I also like the use of a back scabbard for the weapon. Finally, we see flames emanating down his arms at the top of the head. So the score is Pain 18, Pose 21, Playability 15, Pizzazz 17, for a score of 71. A year later, we get this Fora mini in 2006's Blood War set, which can also be used in a pinch as a phoenix. Composed entirely of translucent orange plastic, we get the same dancing fire effect as the huge fire elemental as the light strikes it. Rising from a fire configuration at its base, proudly emerging with its wings upswept and chest puffed out. Excellent detailing as well, particularly on the wings, as you can clearly make out individual feathers. Score: Paint 19, Pose 22, Playability 15, Pizzazz 20, for a score of 76. The legendary phoenix is a powerful elemental bird that embodies the chaos of fire and flames. Composed almost entirely of flame, this OG Monster Manual beastie tends to be reclusive and does not seek out contact with others. When disturbed, however, they are terrifying opponents, capable of rending their foes with beak and claw, or simply engulfing them with their bodies to burn to death. Oh yeah, they have a lot of spell-like abilities as well. And we all know what happens when a phoenix dies. Explosion, then rebirth. We get our only Phoenix miniature in 2018's Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica set, and it's an absolute beauty. Made entirely of translucent plastic, with a red body and talons that gradually fade to violet at the wings and tail, as well as leaving a violet trail of flame in its wake. Effective use of a clear stand allows the mini to capture the moment just before a strike, with talons fully outstretched while the wings are slightly cupped for control. Finally, look closely at the wings. The feathering detailing is perfect, along with the rest of the mini, so score 100. Salamanders are large reptilian humanoids from the plane of fire. Greedy and cruel, they delight in wrapping opponents in their burning coils to watch them suffer. They begin life in larval form known as fire snakes before growing to salamanders. Those lucky and powerful enough then evolve into noble salamanders who become the kings and queens of their regions. We get our first salamander in WotC's second set, 2003's Dragon Eye. Solid start. Set coiled upon a medium base, the creature is posed raised up with its spear held in front of the body in a ready state. We get a decent attempt at facial detailing, and the orangish underbelly is nicely offset by the duller scaling along the back. The triple row of spikes covering the body is a nice touch as well. Score: Paint 16, Pose 18, Playability 17, Pizzazz 15, for a score of 66. Two years later, we get this mini, called a Flame Brothers Salamander, in 2005's Angel Fire set. Set on a small base, I can only assume this salamander has just evolved from its larval form. Not as detailed as the Dragon Eye in either paint or pose, the mini is basically coiled upon itself with its halberd raised in a ready position. This is definitely a defensive pose. Score: Paint 11, Pose 12, Playability 11, Pizzazz 10, for a score of 44. Another 2 years go by before we get this Noble Salamander Mini in 2007's Night Below set. Bright orange in color with a series of black spikes running down its back and underbelly, the salamander is holding his spear like a scepter, imperiously gazing down upon its subjects. A muscular torso and haughty look upon the face complete the look. Absolutely a useful mini to have should your PCs venture into a salamander stronghold. Score: Paint 22, Pose 19, Playability 17, Pizzazz 23, for a score of 81. WotC gets fancy with this one, called a Salamander Firetail from 2009's Monster Manual Legendary Evil set. Firetail indeed, as the tail is composed of translucent orange with flames rising from the tail and continuing up the spine. The upper body is bright orange with black spikes on the arms and belly area. Armed with a wicked pair of falchions, this guy is slithering forward with malicious intent, ready to lay waste to an enemy. Score: Paint 25, Pose 25, Playability 22, Pizzazz 25, for a score of 97. For something different, WotC gives us this Salamander Archer in the 2010's Lords of Madness set. Standard orange underbelly, torso, and head with a dark back. Here the pose has the salamander facing sideways as if to present a slimmer target. To me, he looks as if he has just loosed an arrow and is reaching back into his quiver for another. Face is focused and determined. A couple of these minis in support of a general salamander assault would be pretty cool. Score: Paint 19, Pose 20, Playability 18, Pizzazz 16, for a score of 73. As mentioned before, fire snakes are the larval form of salamanders. This fire snake, from 2015's Elemental Evil set, is a pretty spot-on version of one. Paint is nothing special, yellow underbelly and red back. The pose has it moving steadily forward, trailing flames from its crown and tail. Fun fact: some fire snakes never evolve into salamanders, staying in this form their entire lives. Score: Paint 12, Pose 14, Playability 14, Pizzazz 13, for a score of 53. From the same Elemental Evil set, we get this fully formed salamander. Red underbelly under a brownish back. The dark wash really helps bringing out the scaling detail on this one. Pretty good facial detailing as well. Note the black eyes. Unusual for a salamander, this one comes unarmed. WizKids apparently does not have the same love of salamanders as WotC did, as this is the only one they've released in this time frame. Score: Paint 18, Pose 15, Playability 16, Pizzazz 18, for a score of 67. As mentioned in previous videos, where the planes meet, weird creatures appear. And while no two planes are more diametrically opposed than fire and water, we do have a few creatures that have successfully melded the elements. The Chillfire Destroyer is a massive creature comprised of an icy body that has a raging fire within. How does that even work? As it fights, cracks appear in the ice where the fire can leak out, causing damage to its attackers. This miniature, from 2009's Monster Manual Legendary Evil set, is basically translucent plastic with a touch of red on the spines and mouth. It would have been cool if WotC had been able to give it a red center, but it was not to be. Score: Paint 14, Pose 15, Playability 12, Pizzazz 18, for a score of 59. Our final miniature is this Blister Coil Weird from 2018's Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica set. Equal parts water and magma, this mini has an interesting look to it. The translucent light blue of the body, with tendrils of water or steam, is nicely offset by the reddish hue of the front torso and legs. Note the bubbling along the chest and the helmet-like look to the head. I'm not sure how playable it is, but it's really cool. Score: Paint 20, Pose 16, Playability 13, Pizzazz 25, for a score of 74. And we're finally finished with the Plane of Fire. Sorry for the length, but this plane has the most miniatures. We'll finish up with the planes when we review the minis from the Plane of Water in the next video. As always, thanks for watching Eye of the Beholder. Leave a comment if you like, and we'll see you on the next one.